You're listening to Tonebenders, the Sound Designers Podcast. Let's do this.
Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. I am your host today. My name is Tim Muirhead. Today we will be talking about building your own edit suite, mix studio, whatever you want to build on your property. Some people call them sheds, some people call them garden studios. Maybe we'll get into what the proper terminology should be. We have two guests today. First up is Lucy Mitchell. She's based in London. She runs LJ Studios. She's worked on series and shows like Dairy Girls, EastEnders, Death in Paradise, and lots more. Lucy is also a writer for Production Expert. You might know her great speaker monitor comparison article she wrote a few months back. That got me through picking some new monitors, so I really appreciate you writing that, Lucy. She's also a great follow on Twitter at LucyJSound. Also joining us is Al Sirkett, our returning champion. You may recall him from our ambient isolation episode we did a few months back. Al is a London-based sound designer and editor. He has a long and impressive list of credits going back to the 90s, including The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Les Miserables. When I was first interviewing Al for the ambient isolation episode, I started talking to him after we finished recording because I noticed that he was in a cool studio that had some sliding doors that looked like a backyard in the background. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Lucy shares a lot of what she's doing work-wise on Twitter, and she's been sharing about the build of her backyard studio. And I am about to go down that road myself, so I wanted to get them together and kind of selfishly get some advice and some of the do's and don'ts that they learned so I can put that to work for my own project coming up, and we thought we'd record it so everyone could maybe learn along with me. So Al, Lucy, welcome to the show.
Hi. Nice to be here.
So let's talk about what your goals were with your backyard studios first. Lucy, what did you want to accomplish when your build was finished?
Originally, when we were moving house, I wanted to have a garden big enough to have a studio in it, or to have something that I can convert, an outbuilding or a garage or something that I could convert into something, because, editing, even when you're not mixing, if you're at home in a flat and you're in a semi-detached, this is I'm at end of terrace, and the room I was going to be our third bedroom, so to speak, connects to next door, and you can't be loud, and you get people getting annoyed, especially when I'm doing dialogue where I need to hear things quite loud and stuff. And when I originally looked into it, it was obviously a very expensive venture. But the reason why, as you can see, I've got quite a big room. The reason why I did what I ended up doing was because it's a very expensive thing to do. If I'm just going to move from one room to another, I needed to justify that cost. So I was like, well, if I could have clients over for reviews or do voiceovers, or, my husband's a musical director, so he does a lot of his click tracks and stuff in here. So I was thinking, if I can get people over and have it sort of not client ready, client nice for clients, whatever, then that would mean that I could then have more strings to my bow in order to justify spending all this money. If I'm like, oh, okay, if I earn a bit more money because of it, that'll be really good. And then I can do more mixing from home and actually final mix from here rather than just pre-mixing and taking it into town. So that's why I wanted to get something as big, and I liked working at home and with the dog, and we knew we wanted to start a family. So that was quite important.
So you have a full recording booth as well?
Well, we record in the room. I had this studio designed by Howard Turner, who's from Studio Wizard, and it's all been designed properly so that it's quite dead in here. So, I decided I had the option to get a booth sort of built in, but I thought it would just take. I didn't want the room to suddenly be cut out, and I thought it's not a massive room. It's bigger than most garden studios, but it's not a huge room, and I didn't want to completely cut it out. And I didn't know how much voiceover work, especially at the beginning, I'd be getting, because obviously that's not something I usually offer as a freelancer from home. But to be honest, even without it, it's pretty dead in here, so it works quite well. It's kind of almost like doing ADR, but when you're doing normal voiceovers. But that has its pros and cons, but it works out for the kind of stuff that I've been doing. So yeah.
And Al, what were you looking to accomplish when you started your build?
Mine's quite a bit smaller. Looking at Lucy's in the picture, I can see that hers is quite a lot longer than mine. I just needed to get out of the house. We'd been in our house. We've been here 16 years now. We're very close into town. I'm literally sort of 20 minutes on a push bike into Soho, which is the main area for film mixing and TV work and voiceover, a lot of places like that. I just needed to get out of the house. My kids were getting slightly older. And I just found trying to do effects, mainly effects, I'd be sitting there and there'd be a noise in the background and I'd be like, what was that? And the kids are making a noise and that would distract me, and then where was I? I'd have to go back. So it was either find somewhere nearby. There's a lot of units you can record in, you can use nearby. There's lots of composers around this area and they've all got kind of blocks of buildings where you can just hire a room, and sometimes there's half of them are set over and are soundproofed and have sliding doors and booths in them already. When I looked into the cost of that, it was okay if I was working, but quite a lot of the time if I'm being freelance, I'd say I work 9 months of the year. I didn't want to be spending the money on the rest of the time. So it was just having something where it was worth the investment. It took me away from the house, freed up a bit of space because I've got a lot of rubbish in here as well. Old kit, old speakers, 1/4-inch tape, you name it, I've got it. So it was worth having somewhere where I can completely remove myself. Means I can spend a bit more time with my family. When my kids get home, I can stop work, hang out with them for a bit, have dinner, and then come down here a bit later on and carry on working. Yeah, that was the main thing. I couldn't, size-wise, I'm in a terraced house where I'm absolutely up to sort of 20 centimetres to the edge of my property in 3 locations, and I couldn't have gone much further towards the house.
So the first, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm about to build my own. What do you guys refer to it as? As a garden studio, a shed, just studio? What do you call it?
Depends who I'm talking to.
I say mine's garden studio because I got mine built basically like a house. It's like, it's sort of foundations and built blocks and stuff, rather than the sort of garden office-y studios that are sort of timber throughout. So mine's not actually a shed. It looks like it is from the front because I was smart and made it all like, wooden on the front, but the rest of it's all block and render. So I call it a garden studio. Makes it sound nicer, I think.
Al, what do you call it?
Usually I'm going to the shed or I'm going to the studio. Yeah, I think it depends on my mood, whether I'm looking forward to going to work or I feel I'm diving into a hole.
When we're talking about, with my wife, building it, I always call it the shed. And she's like, no, we're spending real money on this. This is not a shed. It's the studio. Call it the studio. I
actually have a shed which has a bike in it. So, that's one of the things when we were building this, everyone's like, oh, where are you going to keep your lawnmower and your bike? So I was like, in our actual shed that's the other side of the garden. Because my garden, it's not a massive garden. And to be honest, this is a very big building considering how small my garden is. But when I moved to this house, there was a garage here.
Part of our sort of remit was, because I'd say about half my work takes me to a studio where they give us a set of cutting rooms and there's 2 or 3 editors, effects editors, and we're all on the same corridor. So we were aware that this wouldn't always be used for work. And when I go, all my kit comes with me. I've got a table, an S3 mixing desk, a couple of screens, big monitor up on the wall, and all the speaker stands and all the speakers. When I go to a studio, that would all go. So it had to be of a reasonable kind of comfort level that we could keep the chair at the back and a cushion, and the kids can come down and watch TV, or my wife could come down and escape from the kids, or whatever we needed to do. But I would have had one solid door and no glass, just to try and make it as quiet as possible. But it had to look from the outside as if it was going to be something which is most people's, like you say, office, garden office. As much as mine is built, mine's not footings and stuff like that. Mine is just panels that were built and shipped to site to match. And then there was some soundproof work done afterwards to deaden it and to make sure I wasn't annoying everyone in the neighbourhood.
So was yours bought as an outbuilding and then made into a sound studio rather than bought as a sound studio to build?
I went to a company that does garden offices and did packages of soundproofing, and I'd seen a few videos they'd done. They gave me the number of a couple of people who'd had the soundproofing done, and being in this part of town, it was music people or TV and sound people doing the same as me, really. So that was my main concern. And sometimes I work on Loud Thing, Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously, when I wasn't working on that here. But if I had been and I was doing crowd noises and stuff like that, it would have just been annoying for everybody. I have a DJ one side in a studio one side of me who's had top 10 hits and makes a lot of noise. So I the poor people round here either get me shooting people or him making rave tracks. So
I think what you just when you were saying about obviously you take, I mean, I don't take any of my kit away. I usually, if I do go anywhere to edit the stuff, so I'm kind of going into a dubbing suite and it's kind of there, and I do a bit of both. Usually I'm editing and mixing if I do that, but because this is our first home as a married couple, although we were saying, right, well, we're going to get 3 bedrooms so we can have, you know, maybe 2 kids there, and it's not necessarily a first home when people go there for 3 years and move on. And then obviously the idea of building this, I'm like, well, I'm obviously going to be here quite a long time because I just spent, you know, tens of thousands of pounds building this. However, I also know that I'm probably not going to be here till I die. Probably. I think my husband would be happy to, but I would like a bigger garden and to move into the countryside or something. And I was, you know, the design that I had from Howard was brilliant. And there were certainly things that I changed in order to make this more of a domesticated space, so that I could set, so example, you know, the carpets that you get in studios, that really thin, horrible carpet, that would be much better for sound. And I got laminate floors and I put a rug on it because I thought it looked nicer. And if I was selling it on, it won't look like a sound studio. It'll just look like, it would be very, you know, we could sell it as a cinema room or a den. Because we've got, as you're saying, we've only got 3 walls, don't have windows. And I've just got those 2. They've got blinds shut, but just those 2 tiny windows. But I've got really bright lights in here. They're actually dimmed right now, so they're still pretty bright. But, you know, it was important to me that it was not too unusual, so that when we can still sell it on to people who aren't sound people and sort of say it's a den or a cinema room or something. And even now with the pandemic and everyone's working from home more, I feel like home offices are going to be one of the main things people are looking for in a house, because I think so many people are going to start working from home more. So I feel like being able to transfer into something else when we sell it on was actually quite, I was thinking about that while I was doing it. And also I wanted it to look nice because I thought, well, I want it to look pretty.
That's a really big concern, because with the build that we're planning, the first problem that we've run into is that we have to get special permits to build our studio shed. And we decided to do this right when COVID hit, and this permit office was closed. It closed for like 3 or 4 months. So we started the process and put all the paperwork in while they were closed. And the contractor that I'm working with was like, this should normally take about 4 to 5 months to get the permits approved, but who knows how long this place is going to be closed. And you're also not the only one who's thinking about making a home studio given the way the world is right now. So the permit office was inundated, but we actually have our permit hearing soon. But we were also really thinking about like, how studio do I want this to be? Because if I go to resell it, the chances of finding another sound editor or something like that are probably pretty small. But as you say, if it can have the visual appearance of just kind of a 4-walled studio, that would be very appealing to someone. But if they have to go and like cut out a booth that's a weird shape or something, that might be less appealing. So Lucy, you obviously thought of that while you were doing it. Al, did you have any thoughts along those lines when you were first building?
I probably during lockdown, after people were allowed to move about a bit, I had more friends who have got teenage kids saying, can we come and have a look at your studio? And just how much is the sound package and how does it work? Is it good enough? Because they've got teenage kids who are making a hell of a noise, and they want to put them somewhere where they're not annoying the neighbours and getting constant complaints. So I come down there and I've got the whole normal setup, and then I've got a surround sound commercial setup for some other work that I do, a whole Sonos setup as well. And I just put it on really loud. I've got dB meters and I've shown them and I've said, look, there you go. I can knock about 50, 60 dB off, just going the other side of the glass, what's a set of glass doors, because the rest of the package is so well done. As a selling point is a good thing. And again, it takes it. I did the same with the laminate flooring. Didn't worry about what the floor looked like. It doesn't really matter. I went out and got a red Persian looking rug, because every music studio or sound studio I've ever seen in my entire life has a red Persian rug on the floor. So I thought I had to get one of those.
I need to go shopping.
That's standard issue.
Yeah. Everything else is movable. I've got bass traps. I have lots of sound just to stop all the reflections, because I'm mainly doing effects. I don't want too many reflections. So all of those are removable. They're all on cardboard backs so that I can take them all down. So if I moved all my kit and the shelves and all of those out of it, it's just a white box. So it was something that can be used. And we've had parties here where open the doors and this is where the music for the party comes from and goes down the garden. I put a cover over the expensive bits of equipment.
But did you build a machine room as well? Or where's your gear? So
I've got, the room that I'm in is 4.5 metres by 3.4 metres. And then again, part of the agreement of getting the studio is the other side of the wall, which is behind me, is a 1 metre wide place to put garden equipment. And in there is a machine room. So it's a box and it has air going out in and out of the back. So it's nice. I can get in there, I lift it up, I turn it on, I close it. That was really important for me. I didn't do air conditioning, which was a huge mistake. I just thought that I live in England, it never gets hot enough to worry about these things. And then this summer it's been roasting. So I do regret that, but I don't regret having a machine room next door.
Why did you build the machine room out of interest? Why did you have it all behind rather than in the room?
Just to keep it square in here. Just to keep everything here. I wanted it as plain as possible. It's a temporary, I wouldn't say it's a properly built machine room or machine box. It's definitely a temporary kind of unit out there. But well worth it just to not have the machines buzzing in the room, which I have to have if I go into town, if I go to a studio and I've got my kit with me. Very rarely do I get given the space for a machine room as well. So I'm very used to editing when the kit's whirring away. So I thought if I'm going to have it at home, I do want complete peace and quiet.
So do you have to go out the door of this room and then in a door of another room to get to your computer?
Absolutely, yeah. But everything's run. I've got cables running through, so I've got my iLocks in here. I can plug drives in here. Once I've done it in the morning, I don't have to go back in there. I rarely have to go back in there. And even turning it off, the power is inside this room. So I come in here, turn everything on, go round there, and literally all I have to do is press the Mac, and then it bursts into life, and that's it.
Lucy, Al mentioned that he doesn't have air conditioning. Do you?
I do. We have an air conditioning unit that is also heating, and I also have an extractor fan. It's great. It's loud. I got one that was, sort of said, oh, this one's really good value, which is great. I know that there's another dubbing mixer internet friend of mine, I don't think we've ever met, has recently built a studio, and he was asking me about air conditioning, and he's got one that's basically silent. And in hindsight, I probably should have looked into it more. I just, at that point, with all the money, I was just going, what's the cheapest one I can get that's good? Didn't really think about the fact that it was making loads of noise. And some of the time I can have it on and it's not a problem. I mean, if you have it on low, it's probably fine sound-wise. It's if you're having it on high. But if I'm recording in here, so for example, now I've turned off the heating, which is fine because my husband was working. He was teaching from in here over Zoom earlier, and it's quite warm in here. But I actually have turned the extractor fan off as well, so you can't hear it. So that's, if I was to do, say, a documentary recording that would be, say, 3 hours, I don't know if I could turn the extractor fan off for that long. I can definitely do it for an hour and a half, and I'm not going to pass out. I don't know about doing for a full day, and the button's back there. So that's the only thing that would be slightly problematic. But it's the extractor fan is so quiet, and to be honest, very rarely do you, apart from maybe a podcast, very rarely do you hear the voice without anything else on it. The stuff that I'd be recording for would have background, would have, the ambience or the sync sound or music. If you can hear the extractor fan, okay, if I'm delivering to someone, I don't particularly want my voiceover not to be clean. But at the same time, it's not loud enough to really be that much of a problem if it's going for a commercial. I did some voice reels. A voiceover friend of mine directs voice reels, and we did a voice reel here, and I was recording with the extractor fan at the beginning. Then remember, turned it off, and to be honest, once I put the music on it, you couldn't really tell the difference. It was fine.
So what are you doing for heating, Al?
I've got a Dyson heater here, which is controlled and always keeps it between sort of 15 and 19 when I'm not in here, and then 20 when I am.
So it's an electrical. It's electric.
Very
heating.
quiet. It's on night mode, so it only comes on now and then. The curtains, which are down one side, where the windows are, where the door is, have reflective material on the back, so that keeps it a bit cooler. We did hang another sheet off the front of the building to try and cool it down when it got really hot. and that worked a little bit. But again, yeah, I've seen air conditioning where it comes through a long kind of zigzag pattern. So any sound, so the noisy unit's on the outside, and then the air is ducted via various kind of zigzags, and that comes in your room to try and reduce the sound. I think that's probably what I'll go for once we've sort of found the money for it.
So I live in Canada. We have real winters here, so we need some serious heating. And in my second bedroom is an addition to the house, and we put in a ductless heater that we got a more expensive model for. And in the heating phase, it's dead silent. And in the air conditioning phase, if you keep it on low, it's silent. The heavier you crank it, the more it makes a bit of noise. But even on full blower, this model, at least that I have, isn't that loud. So that's what I'm planning to put in my shed.
I probably use my heater more than I do the aircon.
When you're in a small space, I'm saying this is 4 and a bit by 3 and a bit, actually, you get it up to temperature, you're fine. This is the SIP panels, the very thick panels, and then I've got floating resilient bars with more plasterboard on, so it's very insulated. I'll only drop maybe 3 degrees overnight. Again, with all these internet things, I can track what the temperature is, so I can get it up to 20, turn it off, go away, and it will only drop 3 overnight, which is great. So actually, it's not, the heating isn't on that much. Lucy's room's quite a bit bigger, so quite a bit higher it looks as well. So mine's quite sort of, I would say, compact, but it's definitely bigger than some editing rooms I've been asked to go and work in.
So did either of you design troughs into the floor walls for cabling?
It was in my design, and I decided not to do it. So I originally had it had this sort of trunking. I don't know whether it was going to be like desk level or not, but you know when you go into studios and they have along the sort of desk height, and you have this sort of thick plastic and had the plugs. Again, I was thinking domestic household wouldn't really work, and then Howard sort of suggested, oh well, why don't you put the trunking in skirting boards? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, and have it sort of. And he said, you know, when then it's removable, if you make it removable, so that if you need to upgrade in the future for, you know, audio over IP and all this sort of stuff. But in my head I was going, well, it's XLA, it's a few XLR, a lot of my cabling's just a few XLRs and, you know, headphone jacks. I don't think I'm going to be necessarily needing audio over IP, and if I do, I can just extend like some cables. Like I don't have clients here all the time. But yeah, I decided not to, just for the look of it, but I do have the cables running from behind my desk into the back wall, and then they go all the way around the side. So I've got XLR cable sockets on the side for when I want to record voices. Annoyingly, I didn't know I was going to get, but basically behind me I've got a sofa on one side and a keyboard on the other. Now I didn't realise I was going to get the sofa, or at least I did, but didn't think I was going to put it on that side. So I only put plug sockets on the side where the sofa is, thinking that's where the keyboard's going to go. And then when I brought the sofa in, I was like, oh, I should move the keyboard the other side, and I have no plug sockets on that side. So in hindsight, either my advice is either put plug sockets on every wall, or just decide on your furniture before. Well, I thought I decided on my furniture, to be fair. I clearly didn't. So that's annoying. So now I've got extension cables out for my husband's keyboard and stuff, which was completely the whole point of me getting everything built into the wall. So I've got all this, everything's in the wall for all of my audio kit, but his cables for his thing is all over the floor, which is really upsetting. So annoying.
I would say you can never have enough plug sockets. I thought I went overboard. I've got 6 here. I've got 2 over
6
here.
behind the computer.
4 on the back. Another 2 over here, and I've still got 8 gang breakouts. It's constant. There's always something that never needed a plug before, and you suddenly have to plug in. So
yeah, I've realised that now.
Never sprint.
Yeah, I went through this with my builder, and I've kind of decided not to do troughs, just because, well, A, for resale value, it might just confuse people, and B, what I'm going to be using my room for almost exclusively is just sound design and sound editing. I don't have big plans to have clients come to my room. I also don't have big plans to try and attempt to do any mixing. Like, I'll get stuff maybe in a ballpark and then go out and dry hire a spot to finish up. But the majority of the stuff I sound supervise, and then it goes to a mix house for a final mix anyway. So I figure, I'm going to have some XLRs going around to the back. I'll maybe put those in the walls and everything else. I'm not going to have a machine room like Al, though that makes me very jealous. I'm thinking maybe an ISO box might actually be a cheaper option.
Just even if it's just building, it doesn't have to be a complete unit, I think, because the ISO boxes I've seen are very expensive. If you can just build something with whisper fans, something which is going to draw the air off it and has got carpet on the inside of it, something that will just take that incessant hum away. I think it can be done quite cheaply. I don't think it has to be anything too expensive.
I guess it also depends on what your computer is. My computer, I got a refurbished trash can Mac. So it's technically 2013, but it was whenever they came out. But it was all refurbed and the spec. If I was going to get the iMac, this is before the newer... I probably wouldn't have got the new cheese graters because they're extortionate anyway. But when the newer iMac was coming out, I was looking at the spec of this refurb, and it was like thousands more. So I was thinking, it's a good thing to get. And it doesn't really make that much noise. It's on the floor behind my desk. I can't really hear it. The thing that was making more of a buzzing noise for me, and here was my hard drive that I had on my desk. So I've now put that down behind the desk on the floor as well. So I can't hear it myself, and I certainly haven't heard it in recordings. So that's... Because also if I was doing a proper recording, they'd be further back in the room and they wouldn't be sitting at the desk where I'm sitting. So it's actually not been that bad for me. And, people get aircon to cool down the room because of all the gear, but I don't have lots of outboard gear. So I have a computer and I have an audio interface and I have speakers and, my little mixing desk, but nothing that creates too much heat really, apart from the computer. And it's not extortionate, so it's all right.
Our listeners might have just had a good example of why I'm building a shed, because my children are now stomping on the floor above me. And I'm not sure if the mic was picking that up, but that's something I'm really looking forward to, is not having the other noises in the house once this gets built. So what would you say was the biggest lesson you learned or regret of something that you wish you had done?
I think the aircon, probably. Anything else has worked really well. And Lucy was saying about ducting and stuff for cables. It kind of looks a little bit messy, but I've got a set of shelves along one wall, all down one wall with all my stuff on. And all the cables get tucked in underneath there, so I don't really feel that's a problem. I never thought I'd have clients here, because I'm same as you. I think sound editing, sound designing more than anything else. But I do mix bits. I do some commercials. I do documentaries for people where they pretty much want me to give them an output before we're anywhere near finished. I think everything I've got here is good enough for a client to turn up to. They have to walk through my house, deal with my kids and my dog. So if they can deal with that and they can get to the studio, they're going to be happy that the door's closed and they're working. So.
Was that banging your kids?
Yes, it was.
Yes, you needed a garden studio. Definitely.
Yeah, well, when I'm working most of the time, they're at school, like during the week. But this is a Sunday, so they're at home. Yeah. But I need this badly. I have been renting a space for like 12 years, and I realized, the amount of money I was spending in rent, I can build a shed and have it paid off in 4 or 5 years, and then I'm golden. So that was one of the main things that's pushing me. But the complication of that is I was renting a space in a bigger studio, and they would hire me to do stuff because I was in their space sometimes. So now that I'm moving out of that space, someone else is going to move into it. And are they going to start hiring that person instead? I'm counting on the fact that we have a long enough working relationship that that's not the case. But I'm sure there will be some gigs that I won't be getting just because I'm not down the hall anymore. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked me why I didn't rent a space, I think, and it was a lot of money. And I think similar to Al, the whole like not working the whole year thing. But, I don't know how long it would take me to pay this off. But, the not working the whole year. But also for me, I don't know where I'd have to travel. I literally commute to my back garden, which is really handy for me. Especially because, we knew we wanted to start a family, and my husband's a freelancer. I mean, before the pandemic hit, he had choir rehearsals 3 different nights of the week. If he got gigs, they were often Fridays and Saturdays. So if I was out all day, I just wouldn't see him. Like, obviously I would when I'm not working, and he works all day Sundays, which he was doing today. So it was kind of like a lifestyle choice a little bit as well for me. And then I built, when we built the studio, because I was thinking about clients coming, But Al was saying I built a gate in the fence next to here, and I basically had landscape gardeners come in and put in a huge path. So you can go from my house to the studio, and then there's also a path that goes along the front of the studio to the gate. So when I was doing the speaker shootout that you mentioned, when I had all the speakers arrive from the different companies, they just came to that side gate and brought everything, and they didn't have to go through my house, or anything.
So the other side of the gate goes out to the street?
Yeah.
Or
Just
you're on a corner,
pavement.
I guess? Or
I'm literally, there's an alleyway behind me, behind the TV in front of me. So there's an alleyway there. To the left of me is my neighbour's the back end of my neighbour's garden, and to the right is a street. So even if I was really loud, when I was building this, one of my briefs to Howard, the designer, I was like, I'm not really that bothered about sound getting out because I'm at the bottom of a garden and I've got roads on two of the walls and the other side's a garden. I'm really not that bothered about that, but for me it's the sound getting in. That was a concern. And actually my only nervous thing is if I start doing more voiceovers and next door are mowing their lawn, that's like my biggest nightmare, because I think it's pretty soundproof. Like we had fireworks here before, I didn't even notice there were fireworks. I had drilling going on, I couldn't hear it. But I think if someone was mowing the lawn directly next to me, I probably would hear it a little bit, I imagine. I don't know, I haven't really tested it out. But I was just thinking in terms of that question about what I regret, I think I'd never done an extension or any sort of thing where I'd have to hire a builder before. And I didn't realise I had to basically check their work. I kind of just handed them the designs and went, cool, here you go. And I didn't know that that's not really what you should do. So there's lots of things that they either didn't do right, or some things they did where they didn't know they didn't understand it, if you see what I mean. So I would call Howard and sort of say, oh, they've done this. And he said, oh, they should have called me if they had any worries. And I was like, but they didn't have a worry. They didn't realise. They thought they understood it and did what they thought the design said. So I realised, like, we're having an extension done at the moment in my house. And I was like, okay, well, now I need to check them every day and make sure they're doing stuff. They don't do stuff without checking in with me and things like that. So that was something that I guess, regret. And the plug socket thing was a bit of a nightmare. And we had, it's not really a regret, but we had a huge problem with water. That's probably why this room gets really cold. And in the end, we actually ended up having to go with a pump system that they use in basements. And the first quote we got was 11 grand. And I was just like crying. I couldn't stop the build by this point. I was halfway through it, but then I couldn't build it without any sort of pump system because it would just be like flooding with water. And I didn't know what to do. I was just in tears and it was just awful. And eventually we found someone that would do it for, I think it was 5 grand. And I was like, it's still like, like dagger to my heart. But we sorted that out and it was fine. But the basement, the guy, I was thinking, God, is this something that the builders or the people who we had to inspect the ground, the area, the building people, I was like, should they have known this? And the basement guy basically said to me, I've done 2-story basements who haven't had this much water. And I was like, oh, okay. So I felt good that it was unusual, if that makes sense.
Unforeseen, yeah.
It was very stressful. I found the whole thing incredibly stressful. It's fine now.
Well, that's something to look forward to for me.
Yeah. And also
now you don't have to water your garden, though. The sump pump does it for you.
Well, on one
side.
So one side is lovely and beautiful. The other side's like dry and horrible. But I did, the very beginning, it was, we've dug down into the ground. So you come in my studio and you go down steps, down like just over a metre, so that we could avoid planning permission. Because in England, you can actually build certain outbuildings to certain spec before you need to apply for planning permission. And I don't think they would deny it based on the size of the building, but I reckon they would just see the word sound studio and be like, that would be a nuisance, and would just say no. Because it's a quiet residential area with a school. Well, the school's loud, but our road's really quiet. And I just thought they're going to say no if I tried to get planning permission for this, regardless of the size. And I think it's something like 30 square meters. It's quite large. That's not mine. That's the cut-off point. So anything bigger than 30 square meters and anything closer than whatever to your house, I can't remember. And then the height thing was something like 2.5 meters inside. So I was sort of saying, well, that's going to be quite a cramped room, which you don't really want in such a dead space as well. So then they dug down, which again, in hindsight, I was quoted for the job, and then digging down deeper added on about 3.5 grand. And I was like, it's like getting married all over again. Everything is just building up. Everything's, oh, here's another £500. And I was like, I don't have all this. I don't have any money. So like, I've got my old artist mix I never replaced because I haven't got any money. Well, I have money now, but like I was just running out of money left, right, and centre, and it was, you know, I'd saved up and budgeted and sort of, you know, when we bought the house, we had budgeted in. We'd kind of gone less than what our budget was so that we could do this. But it was everything. It was one thing after another.
I wish I'd done that as well. We dug down a little bit, but they did talk to us about digging down further to get more of a headroom because of the limitations around here. I did talk to them about possibly doing it above the legal limit, and then I'd take it if the building regs people turned up, but that never quite happened. But as much as mine's fine, yeah, it's maybe a bit more headroom would make it feel a bit nicer. The other thing for me that I thought about a bit beforehand and not since was security. Was having everything, all drives are password protected. I have to come in the morning and type in so many different passwords just to get things going. But my worst nightmare would not actually be my equipment being stolen. It would be what's on the drives. And if I'm in the middle of a big job or a studio job, then I've got to be careful. I've got security cameras. I've got dial-up security. The security cameras are battery powered, so no one can cut my power and do anything. I always get a signal. So it's things like that I hadn't thought about, that you suddenly sit there with an S3 and a computer and a trash can and various outboard units and all the other stuff, and you suddenly go, yeah, if someone breaks in here, I'm in trouble. So having that security with cameras and phone up and dial up and sensors is... I think you need to spend the money on that just for peace of mind more than anything else.
Yeah, I remember looking at when I was researching which type of alarm to get, I was kind of going, you know, these ones are built in, that's really good. But if they cut the power, and they said, they run off like a backup battery, and I wanted them to contact me, but then if they cut the power, if the power goes, then the Wi-Fi goes, therefore that wouldn't work. And then, you know, so I can't remember what I did in the end. It was all, I kind of got that to work. But now you've mentioned that I've just remembered my biggest regret, and I'm so annoyed about it. And I wish someone has mentioned it to me. Wi-Fi. I didn't run an Ethernet cable from the house. Didn't think about that. Didn't cross my mind because I'd never done it before, and no one mentioned it to me. I'm really quite annoyed with the builders for them not thinking that would be a sensible thing. So then I was kind of going, okay, well, how do I get an internet extend, you know, like another modem to kind of extend it, and then, or do you do the sort of through the wall thing? But I've read really bad reviews about it. Honestly, I was just like, this is so stupid. So I was looking at some things where you drill through my house to put on like a receiver to then have a receiver outside, but that would then require drilling through both walls of this, which would ruin the soundproofing, and of my house. And then and to be honest, the modem's the other side of my house anyway. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. Couldn't believe it. But in the end, we got a hybrid package. So it runs through the power, because we've got the power comes from the house, runs through the power, but also can go over Wi-Fi as well if it's close enough. I'm not sure whether it switches between the two or it uses both. I can't remember. But because when it was working, my Virgin Media broadband is very, very fast. So even though my LJ Studios receiver is slower than my house, it's still, I've done some tests when the pandemic hit, and my voiceover artist friend was like, can I do some at yours, and I need to give them my internet speed. And actually it was pretty good in here. I was quite impressed considering it's reduced from my house. I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's the internet. My main regret is not running an Ethernet cable with the electricity under the ground.
I would say to go for the absolute maximum. I had a friend who'd had a shed done, who's a techno whiz, and he said, I've got Cat 6 cables and all this, and so I went to as much as I could, went as far as I could with sort of the technology. I didn't want to have Wi-Fi down here. I also want the ability, I can't get anything but BT here, so my internet speed is 70 and 20. So I can't, it's not massive, but it's enough. But I wanted the ability to be able to turn everybody else in the house off. So being on a cable here means I can go in the house, pull one cable, and just have dedicated all the internet for me for downloading stuff. It's a good half an hour before they realise what I've done and all plug it back in and get back on the internet. So I get a good half an hour if that's the case.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. That was my next question, the security cameras and such like that. And I haven't thought about the Ethernet cable. I've thought about how am I going to get it there, but I haven't actually answered the question yet. So,
well, what they could have basically,
we're digging a trench to run electrical. So
yeah, so it just goes with the electricity. That's what they would have done.
Yeah,
well, they should have done.
That's what mine's a very, very, very rigid tube, almost just solid. And they ran everything down there, and I've got them to run bits of string down there as well, so if ever I need to pull something down, there's string coming up in the house so I can tap it on there and I can pull down. So if I do need to pull any more cables down, that's available as well.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think we should cover?
No, make it like home. If you spend a lot of time in the studio, and when it's not yours, you tend to not worry about it too much, but I've got family pictures down here and all kinds of strange things. I do try and keep it as a studio, so everything is work related, or like little trinkets or things that people have given me. Try not to let it end up as just a storage room.
I would say, yeah. I mean, obviously, I've tried to make mine look nice, partly because I wanted to have clients here, but again, just because I don't want to be in this kind of dark, I've been in dark underground, not horrible, but dark underground studios, walled, like tiny little things. And I just didn't want to have my own space feel like that. But I think don't try to, if you're going to do it, you kind of you've really got to go head first into it. If you try to cut corners too many places, there's might as well not do it. With my office chair, I got the same chairs that I pretty much see in every single studio in town. Now, new, they're like 700 quid. I got mine second hand, but made sure they were good, and they were like 200. Yes, similar, same brand, but a different range, whatever it's called, model. And what's it called? What's the brand?
It's now I can't think of it either. It's it's a design, an architect's name.
It's the one that Herman
Miller.
Herman Miller. I did get one second hand, but I got a very good one. I mean, 250 quid is still a lot to spend on a chair. It knew they're 700-800 quid. So that was quite important to me, was getting a good chair. Obviously I went with the whole speaker thing. I could have my tiny little Genelecs that I had in my spare room actually make a really good noise in here. And I was like, do I need new speakers? But actually I've got a big room. I'm doing more mixing. I need bigger speakers. So I was like, I feel like you need to do things properly. But again, it depends on what type of work you're doing. I knew that I was moving more into mixing. So that was, again, quite important. But yeah, when you're doing sound effects and stuff, you don't want to have a crappy sound system or a really bad room with not good, bass traps and panels, because then you won't hear certain frequencies, and you could just send something to the mix and they'll be like, what, it's so muddy or whatever. I think, my panels were so expensive. They were the very, very good value for panels. I mean, they were like half the price of most of the quotes I got, but there was still a lot of money on top of the build. You get the price for the build, and then you're like, I've got to get panels. You've got to get a desk and panels and chairs, and those things are actually really important. Maybe not, the desk doesn't need to be snazzy, but the other things, they need to be good quality. If you spent that much money on a garden studio, you can't then have crap equipment and crap chairs and stuff. I think it's important to look after yourself and your ears and your work.
I agree that the chairs and just being comfortable at the desk. I went to IKEA and got a desk, but one that would go up and down, and to give that option. I think another thing that I didn't think about, I'm monitoring 7.1. I've got a 7.1 setup here. And Atmos, when I had it done, wasn't really a thing. People weren't editing in Atmos. I don't think with the ceiling height I could do it. If you had the ceiling height, I would definitely run patch cables up there, XLR inputs, something up there, so that the possibility of having Atmos is there. Have a power point in 2 positions or 4 positions. If you're working on that kind of stuff, will be invaluable. Even if at the moment you think you won't, I think the options are there, and have it reinforced slightly so that you're going to have a heavy speaker hanging off the ceiling would be a good idea as well. And lighting. As random as it is, just I've got spots on the ceiling, kind of LED spotlights that I can move around. I never have the ones over the desk. I only have the ones behind me. I've got a couple of friends who are DOPs, and they come around and go, oh, you should have some lights down on the floor throwing this up, and I'm sure if one of them came round it would make it a very calm place to work. So that's definitely something, rather than just having a couple of spotlights on the ceiling.
Thank you very much for talking to me today and giving me some advice and giving me a lot to think about, and hopefully our listeners. I think due to COVID and just in general the decentralization of studios, a lot of people are looking into this option if that haven't done it already. So thanks for your insight, and congratulations to you both on pulling it off and having great places to work.
Thanks, Tim.
Tonebenders is produced by Timothy Muirhead, Renee Coronado, and Teresa Morrow. Theme music is by Mark Strait. Send your emails to info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter via @thetonebenders, and join Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook. Support this podcast. You can use our links when you shop with Amazon or B&H, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click the support button. Thanks for listening.
If you are interested in more pro audio related content, stay tuned to hear what other members of the Audio Podcast Alliance are releasing. To learn more and find links to other shows similar to Tonebenders, go to audiopodcast.org.
Hi all, this is Becky and Susan from the Sound Girls Podcast, where we speak to audio professionals from all walks of life. Join us Tuesdays at 9 a.m. and listen to the amazing array of sound humans talk about how they got into the biz. And a few cool things, like roadie nicknames and fizzy water preferences.
You can find the Sound Girls Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our website, soundgirls.org.